aid, community care, and political beliefs until freedom.
My name is Marlon Kautz. I am a representative of the Atlanta Solidarity Fund, and I am also one of the defendants in the Cop City RICO case. I'm going to read a prepared statement about what's happened today. We are finally getting official confirmation of what has been clear for years. Police and prosecutors have been recklessly abusing the legal process to terrorize their political enemies without regard for even basic procedural rules. The courts have been forced to acknowledge the defects of this case, but the story is far from over. It is not enough to watch the state flail and stumble in their arguments. It's not enough to see this prosecution failing. These defendants need accountability from the police, from prosecutors, and the politicians who have conspired to bring these false charges against us.
Accountability! Yeah! Accountability!
And it's not just us. Jack Mazurak needs this accountability.
Right.
Tortuguita and their family need this accountability.
Yes.
The public, broadly, needs accountability. Officials need to be investigated. Officers need to be fired. Careers ended. Elections lost. Because if Brian Kemp, Chris Carr, if Andre Dickens, Georgia State Patrol, Atlanta Police Department think they can get away with what they've attempted here, they will do it again and again. They will bring terrorism charges. They will bring RICO charges against police accountability activists, against immigrant rights activists. Now more than ever, we must prevent this. Some civil suits for malicious prosecution have already been filed, and we expect many more. Tortuguita's family continues to pursue their wrongful death investigation. We look forward to these cases winning in court, but more importantly, to uncovering the full scope of the conspiracy against free expression and dissent.
Yes, sir. That's right.
To be clear, this is not the end of this case, but it is the beginning of the end for the organized criminal enterprise which has caused untold damage to activists, communities, to democracy itself.
Right.
All to build Cop City. We will not stop now.
Hello, my name's Brad Thompson. That's Thomson. I'm an attorney at People's Law Office in Chicago, and I represent Serena Hurdle, one of the 61 people who had been charged under this indictment for RICO. This indictment is fatally flawed from its beginning, from its inception. We now have an order from a court that has said that this indictment was fatally flawed from its inception. But more than that, this indictment is not just flawed on a purely legal technical standard. That's the ruling we got from this judge. But what we've heard all week long is arguments about the numerous issues with this indictment. And the important thing to note is that this indictment is a political assault on a legitimate social movement. This was an attack brought by the Attorney General's office against a legitimate social movement and people based on their association, their belief, and their protest. That is the First Amendment. Now, the arguments that have been heard all week, the judge has indicated that at least one of those, the defense was right, that the Attorney General lacked the prosecutorial authority to even bring this indictment. What the judge said was that it could have very simply, the Attorney General's office very simply could have brought this indictment and followed the steps checked the boxes. That's what he said. You didn't check that box. And that was to get permission, written permission from the governor to be able to bring the indictment. So basically, the Attorney General failed to get a permission slip from the principal. Could have gone through that step and didn't do it. So we now know that the charges, all RICO charges against the 61 defendants, are invalid. And that means that all charges will be being dismissed against 56 of the defendants. There are 5 more defendants that are facing domestic terrorism charges, and those charges are under review as well. We just heard argument this morning identifying the flaws with the very statute there. So that's a question as to whether even this domestic terrorism statute itself is lawful, whether that's constitutional. So what we have is a statute itself that potentially violates the Constitution. We have an Attorney General's office bringing an indictment that it couldn't lawfully bring based on that statute. And that statute, while it's specific to one of those counts, it's also intertwined with the RICO count. It is the basis of their RICO count. It is necessary for that RICO count that has now been dismissed. And it's important to note that this is a significant victory. Not just for the 61 defendants here, not just for my client, not for all the other individuals, but for everybody. This is an important political legal victory because this tells the state you can't go and attack a legitimate social movement. You can't use the law to criminalize protected speech, to criminalize a broad-based popular social movement. And it's also important to note, as a reminder, that this Attorney General's office is not just the entity that brought this. This is an elected office, an elected official, Chris Carr, who publicly said he supported Cop City. So this is a prosecutor, a prosecuting entity, an elected official using the law and using it incorrectly and unlawfully. A judge has now made a finding that this Attorney General did not even have the legal authority to bring this indictment and to bring it against a legitimate social movement that that prosecutor disagrees with. So it now is time for accountability, and it's time to fight this type of state repression everywhere it rears its ugly head. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Javier Dejanon, that's Xavier, his last name Dejanon, and I had the privilege of representing former defendant Jamie Marsicano in Cop City RICO. I wanted to, and I'm an attorney based in North Carolina, but I work across the South, and I wanted to echo what Brad Thompson mentioned about this national problem. We have been very blessed to count with the support of people from across the country, lawyers across the country, activists across the country in fighting to stop Cop City in Atlanta and to defeat these charges. But as we celebrate today, I want us to bring this energy to where state and federal governments are repressing these same very movements, these same people elsewhere. There's cases happening of insane charges in northern Texas, Los Angeles, in Oregon, in Chicago, in DC, in New York City. Atlanta was a test run, and the state didn't win this time. But it is up to us. It is up to you all, the media, you all, the people, to continue fighting to ensure that the state never wins. Never! Thank you.
My name is Brent Lyman, and I'm speaking on behalf of Fire Ant Movement Defense. The Cop City case is doomed. The motions will continue, appeals, delays, and appearances could stretch into next spring. Some version of this case will likely stumble on, maybe under a new indictment, maybe with a shuffled list of defendants, maybe with fresh breakthroughs from Homeland Security or the GBI. However it unfolds, it will drag on far longer than it should. Why does the Attorney General's office keep sacrificing two powerful lackeys to this house of horrors? Every path forward carries its own risks. We shouldn't have to remind you that Cop City, beyond its stated aims, has become a rallying point and a money grab for industry, consulting, finance, real estate, and grift in Georgia.
That's right.
We shouldn't have to remind you that the Atlanta Police Foundation, the so-called Community Stakeholders Advisory Committee, local law enforcement, and corporate interests colluded. They created encrypted chats, they held secret meetings closed to observers. They coordinated against the residents of the city. They circulated protest photos from far-right sources. They joked about the sexuality and gender of those they arrested. We shouldn't have to remind you that $110 million they raised only covers phase one. That future funding remains uncertain. That hardly matters because the chief beneficiaries will have already cashed out, moved up, and moved on. We shouldn't have to remind you that the largest media outlets in the country are owned by donors to the Police Foundation. The Police Foundation receives funding from top contractors, and those contractors donate heavily to the governor's campaign. That governor controls the mayor's finances, and that mayor meets with wealthy elites at the Rotary Club. This web of interest forms a near-perfect circle of plunder. And on behalf of this circle, police assemble. They assemble to do what they exist to do: repress, contain, and crush anything that challenges the status quo, the law and order that governs our society. This is why John Fowler and Haley Dixon have endured this long, and why they may continue to endure. This is why they've been called month after month to pursue the most convoluted case in Georgia's history, the Cop City RICO. The prosecution serves a political function for the interests outlined above. Without the case, without the spectacle, without the house arrests and surveillance, the raids and the tear gas, the rounds up and the killing of Tortuguita, the scam might have collapsed. The people, hundreds of thousands across Atlanta and millions more across the country, might have defeated the project and the machine behind it. They were right to oppose it. We were right. And who can doubt it now? The horrors we predicted have come to pass. Federal agents now stalk communities from coast to coast, masked and unnamed, snatching people from buses, farms, kitchens, and churches. We can argue now that we were wrong to resist. Who can argue now that we were wrong to resist the endless expansion of police power? Now that Trump commands them, now that they are his police, the very people who helped lay the groundwork now scramble to distance themselves from his orders, his camps, his federal troop deployments, but they built the logistics. They funded the training centers, they expanded the surveillance. Liberal governments like Atlanta's helped pave the way for the descent of our country into autocracy. This is what cannot be said. This is what the trial is designed to hide. Behind the smiles, the hand-wringing, the appeals to civility and democracy lies a financial alliance, a profitable collusion, a criminal conspiracy. The real racket is not the protesters, it's the state.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Alexis Papali, P-A-P-A-L-I. I think you can see it in the indictment. I'm a defendant in this case. I'm facing outlandish charges of domestic terrorism in DeKalb County and this RICO travesty here in Fulton. The reason we're here today, witnessing this spectacular collapse of the prosecution is against 61 people, is twofold. The laws under which we're being tried today are vague and overbroad, designed to give unreasonable powers to the state to intimidate opponents of their policies and decisions. The prosecutor today actually said, in relation to the domestic terrorism law, which could imprison people for up to 35 years, he actually said, you have to use your common sense to define these terms. Ridiculous. Secondly, we're here because of corruption at City Hall, at the State House, in the governor's office, and because of Attorney General Chris Carr's political agenda and attempts to criminalize dissent. I'll leave it to the people of Georgia to decide whether deeply biased people like him deserve to be in higher elected office. They don't. But I will say this case demonstrates the dangers of narrowly limiting what kind of political speech and activity is permissible in a democratic society. This deeply flawed indictment should be read by every law student as an object lesson on how not to practice law. On the other hand, people everywhere standing up for their rights should pay close attention to how a collective defense among the defendants and strong solidarity of a loving community can overcome political repression and extreme abuses of the legal system. Lastly, I want to say that while we had to deal with jail, the tarnishing of our reputations, legal costs, loss of jobs and housing, etc., we are privileged to have a strong support base. In DeKalb County Jail, I met many people who had no legal support, no funds even for pen and paper from the commissary, or even any idea of why they were in jail or how long they would be there. Mass incarceration in horrific conditions is the real crime in our society, punishing millions of people simply for being poor or people of color. I hope this experience encourages all of us to use this spotlight to end this travesty and all political repression. Thank you.
Maybe for Marlon too, or any of the defendants, are you guys concerned about what happens next? Because this will very likely be appealed by the state and could continue on. I just want your thoughts on what comes next.
Hi, my name is Jamie Marsicano. I'm a soon-to-be former defendant on the RICO. That's not my problem, that's the state's problem, because this is being dismissed. So if the state wants to go at another go, the power of the people will win again.
You all did a lot to try to stop this project from happening. The referendum didn't work, protesting didn't work. By and large, Cop City is open now. You guys feel like a lot of what you did was nothing?
I would say that it wasn't unsuccessful at all. We have galvanized an entire city and many supporters nationally, even internationally, to understand the dangers of this kind of project and this kind of repression. Yes, sir. There's a lot that can be learned from this, and this fight is not over. You know, we're not going anywhere. This movement is here to stay, and it's only strengthened by all of the forces that are implicated by this prosecution. The black community, working class people all over the city, they don't want this waste of their hard-earned taxpayer dollars. You know, legal scholars from around the country are just up in arms about this prosecution. So there's a lot of support being galvanized to oppose how this project plays out. Anybody else want to weigh in here?
Can I ask you another question real quick?
Okay.
Do you want to answer the question? You don't have to.
Okay.
I want to say something. My name is Lisa Baker. I am one of the plaintiffs in the lawsuit regarding the referendum. Me and some of my neighbors sued the city for our right to collect signatures for the referendum to enable a vote about that land. And that our lawsuit is still with the Court of Appeals, whatever it is, the people who make the big decisions. We are still waiting for their decision, so that is not finalized. That land can still be taken back by the people. That vote can still happen, and that lease can still be repealed. The lease, the land is leased to the Atlanta Police Foundation, and that lease could be taken away at any time by the City Council or by the people of Atlanta when we win our appeal.
Sorry, thank you so much. If people have continued questions, we can do interviews. If anybody wants to do a small interview to the side, we can do that, but we're going to wrap up the press conference. Thank you so much for coming.